guys, welcome back to another technique video. This one's going to be a short one and I'm not going to give a full demonstration. I'm literally just going to talk you through this, and I'm going to be talking about Fixative. And this is the fixative that I myself use. It's a Rowney Perfix Colourless fixative, and that is, when you spray it, it's colourless. So some fixatives, when you spray them, you get a yellowy film over your work, whereas this one, it's colourless. It just leaves the white of the paper. It doesn't leave any sort of horrid yellow residue or anything. So I really love this Rowney one, and this is the one that I've always used. I used it at GCSE and A-level art through secondary school. It's just my love. I haven't tried other top quality brands. I've only tried this top quality brand, and it's pretty expensive actually. I'm not going to switch from something that I love and know works to something that I'm not sure of. I've tested and tested and tested this colourless fixative, and it's just astonishing how well it actually preserves your work and everything. So this is the one that I use, and I use it when I have finished a piece. I've added every single layer and I'm really happy with it. I've signed it, I've erased the white area to get rid of any dirty marks that my hand might have left. Then I spray this on. It protects my work really well. You can also use this fixative, and pretty much any other fixatives, to build a tooth back in your paper. So if you're working on a piece and you're using layer upon layer upon layer and you're losing the tooth of that paper and you find that you can't actually add any more colour down, you can use a fixative to add the tooth back. And the way that you do that is do exactly the same. You'd prepare your paper, get rid of any dirty marks, because once you spray the fixative it's difficult to erase. Prepare your paper, get rid of dirty marks, and then you spray your fixative onto your piece, you let it dry, then you spray again and let that dry, and then just keep spraying and spraying and spraying until it builds up a tooth on the paper. And you can feel that tooth just by running your finger lightly across the paper, and you can feel some sort of texture. And that's because fixative is basically like a really fine glue. It sticks all of the pigment of the colour to the paper, so it can't transfer and it can't erase off, and it won't fade as easily because it's got like a layer of glue. It works in the same way that lacquer does on an acrylic or an oil painting. When you finish it, you lacquer it to protect it and to preserve all those colours. It works in exactly the same way for any kind of pencil mark making piece. This fixative is actually good for pastel, charcoal and pencil, so it's good for anything that kind of dusts up and gives a little bit of residue like that. This is the can, and it has a generic like spray nozzle like you'd find on an aerosol, like a hairspray bottle or an aerosol paint can or something. So it's pretty generic. You push it and the stuff comes out. Inside the bottle it has a ball bearing, and that's for use when mixing, so it's pretty much like a paint can. And I've always been advised that you shouldn't actually shake the can up and down like rigorously. You actually rock the can from side to side. So you rock it from side to side to actually mix the liquid and everything inside together. I don't know, that's what I've always been advised, and I've never actually understood why, but I always do it that way because better be safe than sorry. So that's the way that I always mix and shake my aerosol cans. So the way that you would build a tooth on your paper, it advises on the back of the can here that you should spray from 30 centimetres away or 300 millimetres. So I've got a piece of paper here. So you'd have your piece of paper, and then you hold it sort of this, about a head height away from your piece of paper, and basically spray. So you'd work it like that, put it on a flat surface, and then spray your piece all over. Let that dry probably for about 30 minutes, because to let it dry fully it needs quite a long time. Spray again, leave it to dry again, and just keep building and building and building until, like I said earlier, you get that feeling of a tooth across the paper again. And that will allow you to add more layers over the top. I've only ever tried to do that the once, so I've saturated my paper, got rid of the tooth and just basically ruined the paper by adding too many layers. Then I've added layers of fixative to build a tooth back, and then I've added colour back over the top, and I've only ever done that the once, so I haven't then saturated the paper again and then gone on with a fixative again. I've only done it the once, so I'm not quite sure if you could do it multiple times to add a lot of layers. I've only done it the once, so I've coloured, saturated the paper, sprayed, and then added a few more layers over the top just to get those finishing touches. So I've only done it that way. If you are struggling and adding too many layers to your piece, definitely try this fixative technique a go, because you can get more layers out of your paper by doing it that way. The only thing you can't do once you've added fixative is erase anything. So if there's anything, like any tiny little thing that needs erasing, erase it before you start adding fixative, because you will not be able to erase it once you've added multiple layers of fixative. That will be impossible, so that's something you've just got to look out for, that you don't need anything erasing. That's why I said you want to make sure that the white of your paper is really white before you add your fixative. I'm not going to show you how I would build tooth actually physically with the fixative, because as any artist knows, fixative, especially if you use it and have looked into buying it before, fixative is expensive. This can cost me £12 and it doesn't last that long, because I like to ensure that my drawings are fully fixed by adding a lot of layers over the top. So I try and use it as sparingly as possible and only use it when it's absolutely necessary. So I'm not actually going to physically show you, but it should be pretty straightforward. You just spray the fixative, let it dry, spray some more, let it dry. If you're unsure whether to do this on an actual piece straight away, I would suggest trying it on a scrap piece of paper. On a scrap piece of paper, build some layers until you've saturated the paper and can't add any more. Then try adding a little bit of fixative, let it dry, a little bit of fixative, let it dry. Practice on a scrap piece of paper if you're unsure about whether to go straight into a portrait or not, because the technique of spraying and getting an even spread and how many layers and everything, you need a little bit of practice with. So just practice on a scrap piece of paper before ruining a piece of work with spraying your fixative wrong. It might seem silly to be able to spray fixative wrong, but if you do it too close then you get big blobs of fixative and it can actually ruin your paper. If you do it too far away, you don't get any fixative on there and it's not going to build a tooth or protect your work. And also adding too many layers. Although it's colourless, if you add too many layers, it can give a slight yellowy hue. So you really need to make sure that you practice on a scrap piece of paper first if you're going to look at building tooth with a fixative. You don't have to, but it just saves ruining a piece of work that you've put a lot of effort into and it doesn't work the way that you expected. So just have a little practice with it first. That's all I have for you for this technique video. Again, I'm sorry that I'm not showing you physically how to do it, but it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just spraying and waiting for it to dry and then spraying again. And also it is expensive, so I don't really want to waste it a whole lot on a little scrap piece, because I don't tend to saturate my layers as much anymore now I've got more practice, so I don't have an actual portrait to show you how to do that on. Hopefully this little technique or tip video will help you when you oversaturate your paper and add too many layers, especially for beginners, because I get that a lot. Like, people ask me, I've overlayered my paper, how help me, because I need to start again, don't I? No, you don't. You just need to find a way to build more layers. Also, another way to build more layers is actually by using a solvent blender to blend all the wax into the paper, but I'm going to do another technique tutorial video on that, so I'll talk about more of that later. But for now, just the fixative. As I said, I only have the Rowney one here. There are a lot of good brands out there. go for a more expensive brand than a cheaper brand, because the cheaper brand, they tend to not be as protective and they kind of ruin the paper. They get blobs and everything. It's just not worth it. So just invest in a decent fixative, because your coloured pencils need protecting and you want a decent one to protect it that will do a good job. So go for the quality products over the cheaper ones. I will see you in another technique video, guys. Have fun, my little patrons, and I'll see you later. Bye!